And that, whether we admit it or not, I mean, this was the thesis of Huntington, and this has been internalized. So unless we are willing to discuss this, and unless we go into the political economy of this, I don't see how we can address the issue of, because terrorism today is also needed by the global powers to retain the hegemony.
No, I just wanted to point out the next stage of the process that both Manisha and Ravi said. They referred only to profiling and arrest. There is a more morbid, more macabre, and very violent next stage, and that is the extrajudicial execution, the extrajudicial killing. And that spans from Kerala all the way up to Bengal, irrespective of the state governments. And I think, and this is earlier, in the Punjab, friends of mine, and at this latest stage I was also involved, documented 2,000 cases. An entire generation of young Sikhs vanished without trace. Not counting the half-widows of Kashmir.
Now the question about profiling, asking about any other alternative that excludes religious profiling. I mean, I'm not an expert in profiling. I cannot tell you how you should profile a person. I can tell you how you shouldn't. We wouldn't accept profiling a person because of race, because of sexual orientation. Can we profile a person because he's a Catholic priest and he immediately should be suspicious of sexual abuses? It makes no sense. It's no sense is profiling a person just for being a Muslim. And we cannot apply to religious freedom or to certain religious choices things that we could not accept in any other types of personal choices when it comes to the exercise of human rights. And there is also another practical reason. A large part of the questions that were asked after yours is a good response to your own question, in the sense that you could see how many abuses could be generated out of the prejudice that is likely emerging from this kind of profiling.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, the state does not make a distinction in the right manner. It considers Hindu terrorists not as terrorists. And I'll give you two examples, concrete examples. Maya Kodnani and Babu Bajrangi are both out on bail. Babu Bajrangi is a criminal who comes on television, it's recorded in every television station, it's available on YouTube, says that he took a sword and took the fetus out of a pregnant Muslim woman and killed her. And this gentleman gets bail. Whereas the Malegaon blast Muslim accused the court is informed by the National Investigation Agency that there is no evidence against them, and it still takes you another 3 years to get them out on bail and acquittal. I mean, what is happening if you are not profiling a certain community? Second, quickly, 358 does not work, civil tort law does not work. You can't take away 14 years of my life and say, thank you very much, go away. When the court refused, the highest court of the land in the Akshardham case, saw that there was fabrication of evidence, perjury, incommunicado detention, torture, and yet did not prosecute all the police and public officials responsible for this. And when Muhammad Bhai Afzal Bhai went for compensation in a very polite manner, saying, at least let me start my life once again, you throw him out without anything. I mean, this is just not on. This is just not on.
Okay, Manish.
Asked me. And let's look at the way the state also looks at terrorism. You know, the TADA is applied to, Naxalites who kill landlords, but the landlords who retaliate against the landless poor who are also Dalits are never, the TADA is never applied. So the way in which the state also imagines itself as a Hindu caste state and looks at the attack on the Hindu caste landlords as an attack on the state itself, I mean, that shows that terrorist is not just a terrorist, but there are very specific ways in which the terrorist is imagined in, statist discourse. To Flavia's comment, yes, of course, there is, our homegrown communalism is reinforced by the global Islamophobic, winds, as it were. And in fact, it would be good to remember that when POTA was being promulgated, it was the constant invocation of the Patriot Act, which was, done here. And also, every time there is, an amendment to these anti-terror laws, I mean, I've looked at UAPA 2008, 2012, and now again, it's always said that, we have to be compatible with our, commitments to the international conventions. There is no international convention to be, to be committed to when there is, UN Convention Against Torture. Nobody's talking about that, that you have to ratify that, you have to pass a bill, a decent bill, not the bill that the Lok Sabha passed, but a decent bill on torture, because your commitments to UNCAT have not been fulfilled. But there are constant thing about, we have to make counterfeit currency, a terrorist offense now because of the, these new instruments which are being, talked about in international fora. So there is this kind of, and also the desire on our part to constantly label every act of terrorism in India as this mimetic act of, saying that, this is our 9/11. That first the Parliament attack is our 9/11, then the Bombay carnage is our 9/11. There is this kind of, relationship that is there. And to your question, sir, of course, yes, extrajudicial killings, there was no time to come to that, but the fact is that extrajudicial killings are themselves then justified through this whole discourse of terrorism. What happened in Madhya Pradesh a couple of months ago, where these 8 semi-under trials were killed in cold blood, and then it was said, and then the Prime Minister says, the Chief Minister says that, yes, these were semi-terrorists, I'm supposed to feed them biryani in the jail. So that kind of justification, which of course Mr. Modi has done before, saying that Sohrabuddin ke saath kya suluk karna chahiye, and I should have, so there is that, it leads to that kind of situation where extrajudicial killing is not only carried out, but justified and, legitimized in a way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. We are all going for tea and reassembling at 3 o'clock.